You've been running from the one person who holds all your answers. Every relationship you chase, every crowd you join, every notification you desperately check, it's all an elaborate escape plan. But what if I told you that your greatest breakthrough is waiting in the exact place you've been avoiding most? You see, most people think being alone is a punishment. They think it means they're broken, unlovable, that something is fundamentally wrong with them. But what if I told you that's the biggest lie you've ever believed? What if solitude isn't your problem, it's your solution? Look around you. Everyone is connected, yet everyone is lonely. Everyone is busy, yet everyone feels empty. Everyone is talking, yet no one is truly communicating. There's something deeply wrong with this picture, and you feel it in your bones. You've felt it when you're in a crowded room, but feel completely invisible. You've felt it when you're scrolling through hundreds of friends online, but have no one to call at 2 a.m. You've felt it when you're constantly giving, constantly available, constantly on, yet you go to bed feeling like you haven't lived a single authentic moment. This isn't coincidence. This is divine intervention. You think God wants you to be with people all the time. You think spirituality means constant service, endless giving, perpetual availability. But what if you've got it backwards? What if the most spiritual thing you can do right now is learn to be alone with yourself? Every great teacher, every prophet, every enlightened being in history had one thing in common. They spent significant time in solitude. Not because they hated people, not because they were antisocial, but because they understood something you're just beginning to discover. You cannot give what you do not have. You cannot love others if you haven't learned to love yourself. You cannot find peace in relationships if you're at war within your own mind. And right now, if you're honest, you're at war with yourself. You're at war with your thoughts. You judge them. You try to suppress them. You distract yourself from them. You medicate them with Netflix, social media, work, relationships, shopping, food, anything to avoid sitting alone with what's actually going on inside your head. You're at war with your emotions. When you feel sad, you think something's wrong. When you feel angry, you push it down. When you feel afraid, you pretend you're brave. You've been taught that negative emotions are enemies to be defeated rather than messengers to be heard. You're at war with your body. You criticize it, you compare it, you ignore its signals. You push it beyond its limits. You treat it like a machine rather than the sacred vessel it is. Most importantly, you're at war with your soul. You silence its whispers with constant noise. You ignore its guidance with endless distractions. You betray its truth with people-pleasing and conformity. And God is asking you to call a ceasefire. God is asking you to lay down your weapons against yourself. To stop running. To stop hiding. To stop pretending. To sit down. Be still and listen. But you resist. Oh, how you resist. You tell yourself you don't have time for solitude. You're too busy, too important, too needed. People depend on you. You have responsibilities, obligations, commitments. These are all beautiful lies you tell yourself to avoid the most terrifying thing of all, being alone with who you really are. Because what if you sit in silence and discover you don't like yourself? What if you find thoughts you're ashamed of? What if you uncover emotions you've been hiding? What if you realize you've been living someone else's life? What if you discover that the person everyone thinks you are isn't who you actually are at all? This is exactly why God wants you to be alone. Not to punish you, but to free you. You see, the person you think you are is largely a construction. It's made up of other people's expectations. Your parents' dreams, society's standards, your culture's definitions of success, your friends' values, your partner's needs. Layer by layer, year by year, you've built this persona, this mask, this false self that you present to the world, and you've worn it so long you've forgotten it's not actually you. You've forgotten who you were before the world told you who you should be. You've forgotten your natural interests before people told you what was practical. You've forgotten your authentic voice before you learned to say what others wanted to hear. You've forgotten your true desires before you were taught what was appropriate to want. You've forgotten your soul. And your soul is calling you home. Through loneliness, through restlessness, through that deep ache that no amount of external validation can fill. Through that persistent whisper that says, there has to be more than this. Your soul is not trying to torture you. It's trying to save you. It's trying to save you from a life of quiet desperation. From relationships built on need rather than love. from a career that pays your bills but kills your spirit, from an existence that looks successful on the outside but feels hollow on the inside. But to hear your soul's voice, you need to turn down the volume on everyone else's. You need to create space, sacred space, empty space, quiet space where your true self can finally breathe. This terrifies most people. They think empty space means empty life. They think if they're not constantly busy, constantly connected, constantly productive, they're wasting their time. But empty space isn't empty. It's full of potential, full of possibility, full of the person you're meant to become. Think about it. A seed doesn't grow in a crowded garden. It grows in its own small plot of earth, with space around it, with time to develop its roots, with room to reach toward the light. You are that seed. And you've been planted in soil that's too crowded, too noisy, too demanding for you to grow into who you're meant to be. God is asking you to transplant yourself, to create the conditions where your authentic self can finally emerge. But what does this look like practically? How do you embrace solitude without becoming isolated? How do you learn to be alone without becoming lonely? First, understand the difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the pain of feeling disconnected from others. Aloneness is the joy of feeling connected to yourself. Loneliness happens when you're with people but feel unseen. When you're talking but not being heard. When you're giving but not receiving. When you're performing but not being accepted for who you really are. Aloneness happens when you're by yourself but feel whole. When you're in your own company and enjoy it. When you're not performing for anyone and can finally relax into authenticity. Most people never experience true aloneness because they never give themselves the chance. The moment they're physically alone, they reach for their phone, turn on the TV, call someone, text someone, fill the space with noise and activity and stimulation. They mistake being alone with being bored. They think if they're not entertained, they're wasting time. But boredom is not the enemy. Boredom is the doorway. It's the doorway to creativity, to insight, to self-discovery, to peace. When you sit with boredom without immediately trying to fix it, something magical happens. Your mind starts to wander. Your thoughts slow down. Your nervous system relaxes. And in that space, your authentic self starts to emerge. You start to remember what you actually enjoy, not what you think you should enjoy. You start to feel what you actually feel, not what you think you should feel. You start to want what you actually want, not what you think you should want. This is where the real work begins, because what you discover about yourself might not match what others expect from you. Your authentic interests might not align with your career. Your true values might conflict with your family's values. Your real personality might be different from the one you've been performing, and this creates a crisis. A beautiful, necessary crisis. You have to choose. Do you continue living the life others expect from you? Or do you start living the life your soul is calling you toward? Do you keep wearing the mask? Or do you risk showing your real face? Do you stay in relationships where you have to pretend? Or do you seek connections where you can be authentic? Do you continue doing work that pays the bills but drains your spirit? Or do you find ways to align your career with your calling? These are not easy questions. And they don't have easy answers. But they are the questions that define whether you live a life of meaning or a life of quiet regret. And you can only answer them in solitude. Because in solitude, you can't perform. You can't pretend. You can't hide behind other people's energy or lose yourself in their needs. In solitude, you meet yourself. The real you. Not the you that others need you to be, but the you that God created you to be. And this you might be different from what you expected. This you might be quieter than you thought, or louder, more creative than you realized, or more analytical, more sensitive than you imagined, or stronger. This you might have different dreams, different values, different ways of seeing the world, different ways of loving, different ways of contributing. This you might not fit into the boxes that others have created for you, and that's exactly the point. You were never meant to fit into someone else's definition of who you should be. You were meant to expand beyond any definition at all. To become so uniquely, authentically yourself that you can't be categorized or contained or controlled. But to get there, you have to be willing to disappoint people, to let them down, to say no when they expect yes, to step away when they expect you to stay. You have to be willing to be misunderstood, to be called selfish, to be accused of changing, to be criticized for putting your needs first, because the alternative is living a life that isn't yours. Working a job that isn't aligned with your purpose. Staying in relationships that require you to be someone you're not. Pursuing goals that don't actually matter to you. The alternative is waking up at 60 and realizing you've been living someone else's life. That you've been so busy meeting everyone else's expectations that you never discovered your own. God doesn't want this for you. God wants you to wake up, to remember, to come home to yourself. And sometimes the only way to do that is to strip away everything that isn't essential, to create space, to be alone, to get quiet enough to hear the voice that's been whispering your name your entire life. This voice doesn't speak in words. It speaks in feelings, in intuitions, in sudden insights, in dreams, in synchronicities, in those moments when something just feels right, even if you can't explain why. This voice knows things your mind doesn't know. It knows which people are meant to be in your life and which ones are just passing through. It knows which opportunities are aligned with your path and which ones are detours. It knows when to say yes and when to say no. It knows when to hold on and when to let go. But to hear this voice, you have to create the conditions where it can speak. And those conditions require solitude. Not just physical solitude, but mental and emotional solitude. Space from other people's opinions, distance from societal pressures, freedom from the need to constantly perform and achieve and prove yourself. In this space, something shifts. Your priorities become clearer, your values become stronger, your boundaries become firmer, your sense of self becomes more solid. You stop needing other people's approval to feel good about yourself. You stop needing external validation to know your worth. You stop needing constant stimulation to feel alive. You discover that you are enough, just as you are. Not as you should be, or could be, or might become, but as you are right now. This is perhaps the most radical realization of all, that you don't need to fix yourself. You don't need to improve yourself. You don't need to become someone else to be worthy of love. You are already worthy. You always have been. The only thing you need to do is remember, and remembering happens in solitude, in those quiet moments when you're not trying to be anything for anyone, when you can just be, when you can breathe, when you can rest in the simple miracle of your existence. This is what God wants for you. Not isolation, not loneliness, but this deep, abiding sense of wholeness that comes from knowing yourself, from accepting yourself, from loving yourself. From this place of self-love, you can love others authentically. Not because you need them to complete you, but because you choose to share your completeness with them. From this place of self-acceptance, you can accept others fully. Not because you need them to be different, but because you see their perfection as they are. From this place of inner peace, you can contribute to the world meaningfully. Not because you need to prove yourself, but because you have something genuine to offer. But first, you have to be willing to be alone, to sit with yourself, to listen to yourself, to trust yourself. You have to be willing to disappoint the people who expect you to be available 24/7, to frustrate the people who are used to you saying yes to everything, to confuse the people who think they know who you are. You have to be willing to choose your own company over people who drain your energy, to choose silence over conversations that don't nourish your soul, to choose solitude over social obligations that feel empty. This isn't selfishness, this is self-preservation, this is spiritual hygiene. This is how you maintain your connection to what matters most. Because if you lose yourself in other people's needs, you have nothing authentic to give. If you exhaust yourself trying to please everyone, you can't serve anyone effectively. If you fill every moment with noise and activity, you can't hear the guidance that wants to come through you. God wants you to be alone so you can remember who you are, so you can hear what you're meant to do, so you can feel what brings you alive, so you can discover what you actually want, not what you think you should want. God wants you to be alone so you can fall in love with yourself, so you can appreciate your own company, so you can enjoy your own thoughts, so you can trust your own judgment. God wants you to be alone so you can be whole, complete, centered, grounded in something deeper than other people's opinions or society's expectations. From this place of wholeness, you can engage with others from choice rather than need. You can love from abundance rather than lack. You can give from fullness rather than emptiness. From this place of center, you can weather any storm. You can handle any criticism. You can navigate any challenge because your sense of self isn't dependent on external circumstances. From this place of groundedness, you can pursue your dreams without attachment to the outcome. You can take risks without being paralyzed by fear. You can be creative without needing approval. This is the gift that solitude offers. Not loneliness, but self-possession. Not isolation, but integration. Not emptiness, but fullness. But you have to be brave enough to receive it. You have to be willing to disappoint others in order to honor yourself. You have to be willing to be misunderstood in order to be authentic. You have to be willing to stand alone in order to know who you really are. The path isn't easy. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when you wonder if you're making a mistake, when you long for the safety of conformity and the comfort of approval. But remember this, every time you choose authenticity over approval, you become stronger. Every time you choose solitude over societal pressure, you become clearer. Every time you choose your inner voice over external noise, you become more aligned with your purpose. And your purpose isn't small, it isn't selfish, it isn't insignificant. Your purpose is to be uniquely, powerfully, unapologetically yourself. To contribute something to this world that only you can contribute. To love in a way that only you can love. To create in a way that only you can create. But first you have to know who you are. And you can only know who you are when you're alone with yourself. When you can't hide behind other people's energy. When you can't distract yourself with other people's needs. When you can't lose yourself in other people's dramas. When it's just you, in the silence, in the stillness, in the sacred space of your own presence. This is where God meets you. Not in the noise, not in the crowd, not in the constant activity and achievement and approval seeking. God meets you in the quiet, in the emptiness, in the space between thoughts, in the pause between breaths, in the stillness of your own heart. And in that meeting, everything changes. Your priorities shift, your relationships transform, your work becomes aligned with your soul. Your life becomes an expression of your authentic self rather than a performance for others. This is what God wants for you. This is why God wants you to be alone, not to punish you, but to free you. Not to isolate you, but to integrate you. Not to make you lonely, but to make you whole. The invitation is always there. The door is always open. The silence is always waiting. The question is, are you brave enough to accept it? Are you willing to choose the discomfort of authenticity over the comfort of conformity? Are you ready to disappoint some people in order to honor your soul? Are you prepared to lose relationships that require you to be someone you're not in order to find relationships where you can be who you really are? Are you willing to be alone with yourself until you become someone whose company you genuinely enjoy? The choice is yours. It always has been, and it always will be. God isn't forcing you to be alone. God is simply making the space available, creating the opportunity, providing the invitation. The rest is up to you. Will you accept the invitation? Will you step into the space? Will you embrace the solitude that's calling your name? Will you trust that in learning to be alone, you'll discover you're never truly alone at all? Because in the depths of solitude, you'll find something unexpected. You'll find that you are connected to everything, that you are part of something vast and beautiful and meaningful. You'll find that being alone with yourself is actually being alone with God. And in that sacred communion, you'll discover who you really are. And who you really are is more magnificent than you ever imagined. The journey begins with a single step. The step away from the crowd. The step toward yourself. The step into the silence where your soul is waiting to welcome you home. Take that step. Trust that step. Know that in taking that step, you're not moving away from love. You're moving toward the greatest love of all. The love that has been waiting for you your entire life. The love that will never leave you. The love that will never judge you. The love that will never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are. The love that is you. This is why God wants you to be alone. So you can finally meet the person you've been searching for. Everywhere else, yourself. But let me tell you what happens when you resist this call. When you continue to run from solitude like it's your enemy, instead of embracing it as your greatest teacher, you become addicted to external validation. Every decision gets filtered through what will others think. You check your phone obsessively for proof that you matter. You say yes to invitations you don't want because saying no feels like rejection. You become a people pleaser, not from love, but from terror of disapproval. You twist yourself into whatever shape others need. You laugh at unfunny jokes. You agree with opinions you don't share. You become a chameleon, changing colors so constantly that you forget your natural color. You become chronically busy. Your calendar becomes a weapon against yourself. You fill every hour because empty time feels threatening. You equate productivity with worth. You stay busy to avoid uncomfortable questions. Is this what I want? Am I happy? Who am I when no one's watching? You become emotionally dependent. You need others to regulate your emotions because you never learned to do it yourself. When sad, you need cheering up. When angry, you need calming down. When afraid, you need reassurance. You've outsourced your emotional stability to people with their own struggles. You become spiritually hungry but never satisfied. You consume endless content about transformation. You collect insights like souvenirs. But nothing sticks because you never create space for integration. You're always moving to the next thing, hoping someone else has the answer you can't find within. This is the cost of avoiding solitude. You live someone else's life while yours waits patiently. Your dreams shrink until they fit others' expectations. Your voice quiets until you barely hear it. Your light dims until you're practically invisible, even to yourself. Here's what's beautiful about this moment. You can change this pattern. You can make a different choice. You can accept the invitation that's been waiting. You can start small. 5 minutes of sitting in your car after work. 5 minutes walking without your phone. 5 minutes of silence before filling your day with noise. In those 5 minutes, don't try to fix anything. Just be present. Notice your breathing. Feel your heartbeat. Observe your thoughts without judgment. Let your mind wander. Pay attention to what comes up. You might feel restless. This is normal. You might feel bored. This is the doorway. You might feel sad or angry or afraid. These emotions aren't problems to solve, they're messages to receive. Your restlessness is telling you something. Maybe you're living too fast, moving too quickly from one thing to the next without ever arriving anywhere. Maybe you need to slow down to savor moments instead of consuming them. Your boredom is telling you something. Maybe you've been stimulating yourself into numbness. Maybe you've forgotten how to appreciate simple pleasures. Maybe you need to rediscover wonder, to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. Your sadness is telling you something. Maybe you've been avoiding grief that needs to be felt. Maybe you've been pretending everything is fine when it's not. Maybe you need to honor what you've lost before you can fully embrace what you have. Your anger is telling you something. Maybe you've been accepting situations that don't serve you. Maybe you've been violating your own boundaries. Maybe you need to stand up for yourself, to say no more often, to protect your energy more carefully. Your fear is telling you something. Maybe you've been playing it too safe, avoiding risks that could lead to growth. Maybe you've been living in your comfort zone for so long that you've forgotten what you're capable of. Maybe you need to trust yourself more, to believe in your own resilience. All of these emotions, all of these messages are available to you in solitude, but you have to be still enough to receive them. You have to be quiet enough to hear them. You have to be brave enough to feel them. As you practice these small moments of solitude, something begins to shift. You start to crave them. You start to protect them. You start to prioritize them because you realize they're not luxury, they're necessity. You begin to notice the difference between how you feel after time alone versus how you feel after time in crowds. You begin to recognize which activities energize you and which ones drain you. You begin to distinguish between relationships that nourish your soul and relationships that deplete it. You start making different choices. You decline invitations that don't align with your energy. You end conversations that feel forced or superficial. You create boundaries around your time and attention. You become more selective about who gets access to your presence. Some people will notice these changes They might not like them. They might feel threatened by your new boundaries. They might accuse you of being different, distant, selfish. This is the test. This is where you discover whether your commitment to yourself is stronger than your need for approval. Because the people who truly love you will respect your growth. They'll celebrate your authenticity. They'll encourage your journey toward wholeness. The people who don't, well, they were never really loving you anyway. They were loving what you did for them, how you made them feel, what you provided for them. This distinction becomes crystal clear in solitude. You begin to see relationships for what they actually are, not what you hoped they would be. You begin to see people for who they actually are, not who you needed them to be. This can be painful. You might realize that some relationships are built on codependency rather than love, that some friendships are based on convenience rather than connection, that some commitments are driven by obligation rather than joy. But this pain is productive pain. It's the pain of waking up, the pain of seeing clearly, the pain of choosing truth over comfort. And on the other side of this pain is freedom. Freedom from relationships that require you to be less than you are. Freedom from obligations that drain your life force. Freedom from commitments that take you away from your purpose. In this freedom, you discover something remarkable. You discover that you actually like your own company, that you have interesting thoughts, that you have valuable insights, that you have wisdom to offer. You discover that you're creative in ways you never explored because you were too busy being what others needed you to be. You discover that you're funny in ways you never expressed because you were afraid others wouldn't get your humor. You discover that you're deep in ways you never revealed because you thought others couldn't handle your complexity. You discover that you're enough, not because you've achieved something or earned something or proven something, but because you exist, because you're a unique expression of divine creativity, because there has never been another you and there never will be. This realization changes everything. When you know you're enough, you stop trying to prove it. When you know you're valuable, you stop seeking validation. When you know you're lovable, you stop desperately seeking love. You begin to love from overflow instead of from emptiness. You begin to give from abundance instead of from depletion. You begin to serve from joy instead of from obligation. Your relationships transform. Instead of needing people, you enjoy them. Instead of using people to fill your empty spaces, you share your fullness with them. Instead of trying to get love, you become love. Your work transforms. Instead of working to prove your worth, you work to express your gifts. Instead of pursuing success for external validation, you pursue meaning for internal satisfaction. Instead of climbing ladders that lead nowhere, you walk paths that lead to purpose. Your entire life becomes an expression of your authentic self rather than a performance for others. This is what God wants for you. This is the gift that waits for you in solitude. But you have to be willing to unwrap it. You have to be willing to sit in the discomfort of not knowing who you are so you can discover who you really are. You have to be willing to feel the loneliness of being disconnected from others so you can experience the joy of being connected to yourself. The invitation is always there. In every quiet moment, in every pause between activities, in every breath between words, God is calling you home to yourself, calling you to remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. Are you listening? Can you hear it? That gentle whisper beneath all the noise saying, "Come home, beloved. Come home to yourself. Come home to the truth of who you are. Come home to the love that you are." This is why God wants you to be alone, not as punishment, but as homecoming, not as exile, but as return, not as ending, but as beginning. The beginning of the rest of your authentic life.